Right, so in the middle of the technical contents, this technical conference, I get to talk to you for half an hour about administration. Hopefully it won't be half an hour, it'll probably be a fairly short talk, and hope the aim is to be a start of a conversation about what the Faucet Foundation should be and should do for the community. So I'm a fairly simple person, and I like to take things in straight lines, so I tend to start at the beginning. And in the beginning we had some guys who were developing this thing called Faucet, and they came from 3 different organizations, and each of those organizations had their own reasons or why they probably weren't the right organization to take on and drive Faucet forward. So there was an idea floating around that there should be something else that would be dedicated to Faucet and would work with the community. And so we got together. I forgot this, but apparently it was a rainy day. It was in May of this year, which is autumn and fall in New Zealand. And we sat around in the computer science tea room and made some plans. And we talked about what sort of an organization did we want, and how would the organization work. And we threw ideas back and forward and came up with some plans. And at the end of the plans, we got to assign jobs. And it turned out that 3 of the people in the room were already pretty busy with doing things for Faucet. So I ended up with the job of making the Faucet Foundation happen. Making it happen, it was fairly simple. It took a little while because I have a day job as well, but we went away and we talked to some legal advisors without actually paying them any money, which was quite good, and we made up a set of rules for Faucet Foundation. And we sent out the rules to people who we thought were interested because we needed the approval of them. And we got their approval, and then we went round and we collected all their signatures and filled out a form. And then just over a month ago, we got the final approval. So the Faucet Foundation now exists. It means that Faucet has an entity that supposedly represents the Faucet community to look after it, and what we need now is to work out what we're going to do with that. There was one thing that you possibly have seen, the repository. It used to be a REANS repository. We now have a Faucet SDN repository, which the Faucet Foundation is nominally supposed to be responsible for. So that's the kind of the visible thing. So the Faucet Foundation is an incorporated society, and in New Zealand, incorporated societies, the Incorporated Societies Act is dated 1908, so they've been around for a long time. They're very, very common. They're really part of the fabric of society in a lot of ways. But I discovered that they're not a common thing overseas. So I felt I needed to explain it. So it is literally a society. You need 15 or more people to get together to form the society. And it creates a legal entity the same way a limited liability company perhaps forms an entity. But as part of the legislation, the entity provides protection. So if the Faucet Foundation runs up debts, the members are protected from those debts, as long as the rules mean that they have no financial interest. So if the Faucet Foundation makes money itself, then members of it are not entitled directly to that money. So it's kind of the equivalent of what the Americans call a non-profit, I believe. It doesn't have quite the same liberal tax advantages as an American non-profit. It does have some tax advantages. There's some requirements. Sorry, it's registered with the New Zealand Companies Office. And in fact, if you go on to the New Zealand Companies Office, there's a register there, and the documentation's all public. You can search for it and find the application form and find everybody's signatures and all that sort of stuff. There's some requirements. We have to have an annual general meeting where members get to vote on things that we're allowed to vote for. We have to file an annual return, financial return with the Companies Office to say what we've done with our money. And we have to follow the rules that we've set up. Of course, at the annual general meeting, we can vote and change those rules if we don't like them. So that's a fairly easy one. We just change the rules to so. The legislation and enforcement around this is pretty light. Courts, incorporated societies are often clubs and things like that. Sometimes personalities come into play. Courts take a fairly dim view of people not being able to work things out by themselves. So generally speaking, it's a matter of agreeing amongst ourselves about how things should work and getting on and doing stuff is the plan. The important part of the rules is the purpose, okay? So we have to do stuff, and in particular, if we have money, we have to use it for the purposes that we have defined. Now, the purposes are defined in the rules, and we can, if we want to, change the rules, but this is what everybody saw and agreed to when we created the society. I assume you can all read. I'm not going to read them out to you. I hope that's big enough to read, even in VGA resolution. But it's all about furthering Faucet, looking after Faucet, encouraging it, looking after the community, providing infrastructure, making it sort of a reference implementation for SDN, hopefully, and something that's going to be useful and people want to. There's a clause there that talks about Faucet and related components and applications. So we need to think a little bit more about what that might mean, and obviously benefit the networking community. And it does talk about open sources as well. We have a board. I'm on the board. You've seen various members of the board: Angela, Simeon. Most people know Inda. Is Inda in the room? We also have Ian Welsh, who's from Victoria University. Mark has also presented today as well. Josh introduced me at the beginning of the day as the chair of the foundation. There's a sort of a dirty secret there, which is that we had our first meeting and we actually failed to appoint any officers. When we failed, because I had set it up, I was chairing it, and the board agreed that I could continue chairing the meeting. So the official documentation is signed by Richard Nelson, chair of Faucet Foundation, acting in brackets. We hope to have a proper election and appoint some officers as soon as tomorrow afternoon, probably. It's supposed to be community driven. We don't want this to be some sort of substitute for one of the organisations at the beginning, driving things as a proxy. So we'd like some input, fundamentally. We're all here for the conference, so you're welcome to come and talk to us. Tomorrow morning, we've got a breakfast to specifically get together and talk about the Faucet Foundation, and it's supposed to be an open event. So you're all welcome to come and join us tomorrow at the Perseverance Hall, which is basically across the road from the guest house, from the people who are staying in the guest house. It's the cafeteria, I understand. And if you've got any ideas or feedback, or you disagree with anything we're doing, we'd love to hear from you. You can also interrupt me now. I'm quite happy with that. My day job is a lecturer, and I'm generally pretty happy if I get any feedback while I'm talking. So. Hopefully you would like people to join the foundation. The question is how, and the answer is we haven't set the rules about that yet, so it's a little bit difficult, but we will be doing it. That's definitely on our list, is to create a process for people to join it. So the people who joined at the beginning, we required 15. As it happened, we got I think 16, and one of those was Noviflow joined as a company, and companies count for 3, so we were well over the 15 barrier there. But yeah, so membership. Currently, well, we said it was going to be free for anybody who joined at the beginning, so it's free. Our financial year ends on the 31st of March, so up till, if you joined at the beginning, we're not going to charge you anything before the 31st of March. The rules say, and these are fairly generic rules, to say we can say how people are members and how they join, and they also say that we can charge subscription levies and you are expected to pay them. We haven't really discussed what they should be. There's been some ideas. There's lots of suggestions you can see on the website about what other foundations might charge. Some of them charge very large amounts of money. We're not an organisation yet that's doing such things that we need to charge, or we probably could justify charging large amounts of money. But on the other hand, if we want to achieve things, we probably do need an income. So if people have ideas, obviously we've got a lot of individuals at the moment. We do want individuals. There's a lot of us who represent companies that, for various reasons, we would like to join, and we think that it would be great if those companies can support it. Some of those companies are large entities. Some of them are research and education networks that claim to have very small budgets. Some of them are network research groups that have even smaller budgets. So there's a wide range, and we have to work out how to suit everybody and still achieve what we want. So that brings us to the topic of money. The short thing is, at the moment, we have no money. There's no money in the foundation at all. And so we need to work out how to get some money. If we're going to be a community-driven organisation, there's a lot the community can do, and there are certainly people who are members, or organisations who have people who are members of the foundation who've put in a great deal of time and effort, and all that equates to money already, but the foundation itself probably needs a little bit of money. We have ways of getting money. The obvious ones are charging people who are members. As I said before, our members vary widely in terms of scope and financial ability. Sponsorships, we probably want to establish a way of people sponsoring us. The reality is some people are already sponsoring Faucet itself, and we need to think about whether sponsoring Faucet counts as sponsoring the Faucet Foundation, or whether there's how that works. Grants, we can apply for grants. In fact, I have already applied for a grant for the Faucet Foundation from a small fund that exists in New Zealand. It's only a $10,000 application. They seem receptive. I've gone through the second round. I will find out about that later on. So we might have an initial pot of money, which would be nice. And we can, if we want to, involve in trading activities. Once we do that, that's where the tax rules in New Zealand are not quite so generous as perhaps you'd like them to be. So maybe the next Faucet conference will cost some money to come to, but On the other hand, we want to promote Faucet and making it free or cheap or as easy too. So there's a bit of a trade-off there, and we need to think about that. And if anybody has any ideas about, you know, what they want to contribute or how it would be best for them to contribute, you know, please come and talk to us, as I said. So that leads us to this. This is probably the most important slide, which is what do people want the foundation to do? And I've already had some great suggestions from people who've been talking to us. We have a little list. I haven't gone into a lot of details here because I'm hoping that people will come up and let us know their own ideas without us sort of triggering specific thoughts. So you know, the concept of infrastructure is mentioned in the foundation. We have to provide, or we're supposed to try and provide the infrastructure for the community. We want to provide mechanisms for people to be able to collaborate, provide suggestions. There's already the mailing lists and the Faucet, Faucet.nz website about Faucet itself. We have a domain which is faucet.org.nz reserved for the foundation. Do we need a place for people to log in? Do we just establish, you know, a Google Drive or something somewhere that people can get access to once they're a thing? We obviously have to administer this, so we will need to think about how different members to administer stuff. We probably want to do some promotion and marketing. This is the Faucet branding that Brad was able to produce with a graphic designer that I'm using on the slides here. But do we want to provide more material? Documentation's come up a few times. Mark is talking about a cookbook, Faucet. There's also already a bunch of interesting things. We just saw Ben's fantastic tutorial. We should be linking to material like that. The NovaFlow people have an Inside OpenFlow website which has material about Faucet. If there's stuff that people can contribute there, we're pretty interested to learn about it. We've had discussions about certification. You know, how does a vendor assure a potential customers that their hardware complies with or passes the Faucet tests? If the customer is sophisticated enough to be able to run the tests, that's all very well and good, but not every enterprise that has a network is necessarily going to want to sit down and do that. Faucet's a fairly fast-moving target, and we want people to track a fast-moving target, so it's an interesting trade-off. Development is an interesting one. Obviously, the people who are sponsoring or paying developers to do the work get a lot of input to what development should happen, but equally, we want to be in a position where people who are not, who are just users of Faucet, can provide feedback about what sort of development they would like to see. And then there's the issue of other projects. So other projects are listed in the mission statement. What other projects do we want to look at? You know, so some of them are fairly simple. There's Gauge. Gauge is really part of Faucet. It should be. And then we start looking at, well, there's a lot of other bits and pieces you need to be able to run Faucet. Some of them are entirely well looked after all on their own, but perhaps we could collaborate with those people a bit more. Is there anything else that we actually need to bring in under the wing of the Faucet Foundation? So that's all the material I have. That's the Faucet Foundation. If anybody's got any ideas, you'd be more than welcome to contribute them now. Dan?
Just to make something that you and I have talked about, which I'd love everyone to think about, how do we define success for the foundation? What would you like to see Faucet in 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years? And we have some idea of what success looks like, then we'll help us decide how to do it.
Yep. Yes?
slightly larger circle.
Yes, Lena.
I said Faucet has gone from just a few people in New Zealand to the largest circle of people here, and it's picking up momentum, and it's certainly production grade. But at some point, it has to get much, much larger, where it's commonly selected as a technology for doing at least enterprise networking. So if the foundation can say a 5-year vision to get to that level of expansion, that would be a measure of success.
Right.
That might be too ambitious, and so you could say what could happen within a year. I would say this audience should double within a year, and that would be a measure of success. And so I think it's all about growth of something that is not what is already strong, and just make that whole target. I don't think more features in Faucet are necessarily a measure of success. It already does a lot.
Right. But as Dan said, we have talked about it, and I've talked about it with developers, and one of the key things is really people using it. Yeah. It's really the measure that people are interested in. Deployed ports, deployed instances, and people engaging with it. You know, so there's a vibrant ecosystem. People not necessarily people contributing to Faucet, perhaps, but also people building things because they've got Faucet and they need something to go along with it. Right? That sort of is another area which we need to talk about. Yeah. Yes?
I see Faucet as a practical instantiation of OpenFlow, right? Because OpenFlow means many things to different people, but this is, I mean, it's really elegant, right? You pass this unit test and you're Faucet in some sense. So would the charter to be to define what Faucet is, or to say Faucet is just one particular profile and you can have other practical profiles? I mean, we are kind of asking for Tower of Babel over there, but could it be part of the charter to say this is what it means to define a practical OpenFlow instantiation for different applications? So it might not be what we envision Faucet to be, but there's Faucet A, B, and C in the future. Is that desirable or something?
So you're saying at the moment we have a piece of software that's an enterprise controller that works to an OpenFlow definition. Right. But there could be other things that work the same. Yeah.
It's like the forking of Android, potentially.
There's a new sticking man.
So thank you for bringing up bringing up that way. So just as a bit of a cultural explanation. So I consider myself a mirror Kiwi, so both sides can disown me. One of the problems I think that we do need to solve. So and I'm glad you brought up Android because it's a great example. So consider this thought exercise. What if a New Zealander had invented the smartphone? So New Zealanders are not so great at explaining the value of things, just culturally don't do that. So let's say New Zealanders invented a smartphone. We would come to you and be like, oh, so we've got this thing. It's kind of like an old cell phone, except this one's $1,000. The battery lasts about 5 minutes, and it does have a phone function, but the phone function doesn't work very well. There's some problems, right? So I mean, this is not our strength that can communicate it, but I think that's a concrete example of something we could do there. Is say, okay, let me come and help you. Put this. It doesn't necessarily. You could use the enterprise network. Use a different way. It should be much easier to use. It could be packaged different ways. So you say you don't care how it works, but you can get the benefit of it, or maybe you do care how it works and get benefit from a different way. So thank you. I think I believe personally that there's something we should do.
I was just intending to be provocative, but
That's very helpful. This is great. Yeah, I strongly agree with you.
Who are you talking to?
Awesome.
I have a question about contribution and time. So some organizations may have a lot easier time contributing time, developer resources, other kinds of resources, Faucet Foundation, and already do. My question is it worthwhile trying to account for the value of those contributions within the foundation? Or do we not really care at this stage to track that?
Well, that's a good question. You can read the board meeting.
Oh, yes.
I'm not, don't have a single answer to that one right now.
The Open Compute Project does that.
Right.
It takes some administration.
Is it helpful?
Right. But there's
Because
a,
of the structure, if you're going to be at this level, whenever you pay this much, you contribute this many sort of, man hours or something of labor. And I don't know how they ought to do that. But it's pretty, that was fine.
Just like non-profits tracking time. Okay. There are some abstractions.
yeah. My thought is we don't want to create more administration when we've got no money to pay for administration. So, but maybe at some stage that would be.
Both for the foundation and for the people who contribute those resources.
There's clearly a lot of value in there, and there's, having gone through the process of applying for a grant, being able to say that Faucet is worth this much or has had this much contribution to the project would be a useful thing. But it's a big overhead as well. Yes.
Has there been any thought about standardizing Faucet YAML?
So not from the foundation, from the developers, they might want to answer that.
Yes, I think just where we take the use cases as they come up and it evolves. So one of the things we've observed with other SDN efforts is that try to start with standards. And this is in no way representative of what my organization thinks or anyone else thinks. It's purely personal view, but something like the ITF would say rough consensus and running code, otherwise no one's none of the above. Now, we're much more like if you get it right and it's useful, don't worry, the standards will emerge.
So we have a simple primitive for that at the moment. That's the version tag in YAML. So we have version 1, and then we cut it into version 2, which we did backwards compatibility for, and then we turned off. And so I think that's been good so far.
There is also like a creative tension at this stage. So if you want to be standard enough that people are not too terribly inconvenienced when things change, but you don't want to be so standard that you can never change. And the point at which creative tension will move over like 500%.
Is there any thought to making an LTS version of Faucet? I mean, this would be down the road. Something that is maintained. I mean, this would come in with that YAML stability and things like that.
The thing is like scope for an appliance kind of thing. Like here's something we don't even mention OpenFlow on. Like it's a magic box that does things.
I love the stable release.
So I kind of argue that an LTS as a concept kind of goes against the CyberRE as a concept, where you're pushing on green flavors and good version. So that might be something to consider.
If I could further express your idea in the form of the Linux analogy, you just ask the Linux Foundation if they would have an LTS version and not canonical. So, would I hope that something would spring up like a canonical? Sure. And I'd happily ask them if they plan an LTS version. This is the foundation.
At the moment we do, I guess, basically just the semantic version. So the last dot whatever is going to look like pretty similar with my changes. And when we change the native version, something horrible is going to break and you can look.
Lots more opportunities for
But I will also note that while there's one Linux Foundation, there's Canonical, there's Red Hat, there's multiple providers of technology in that space, but they coordinate around a Linux Foundation.
And at the same time, I mean, I think what Faucet really provides is also similar. Let's say controller mechanism, right? I mean,
the real value when you're talking about applications for the consumers. Okay, they are going to consume it in different forms and shapes, and their requirements, I think, are the ones that should drive whether they should be standardized in for a particular version number or whatever it is. They don't really care as long as it's solving a particular problem. So it's a hard question to answer, but my thought process is, because you have a push to beam and all the other functionalities built in, I think we should be relatively safe in terms of pushing your code and not having to worry that we will actually break the world or break something that is actually going to be so disastrous. Unless, I mean, in your case, I can't see, because as well, you want to maintain with go with a stable version and then have another one. That's right. So your case is a little bit, but if you are only looking at it from a higher level abstract, because we don't want to look southbound as much as we can, but we want to go up in terms of applications and that kind of stuff, because that's where the real value is. If you want to focus on that, we have to make some compromises on not being able to sit down.
So we're eating into afternoon tea time, but there was one more question. I don't want to stifle contributions.
Being relatively new to Faucet, I would just offer up that I think promotion and marketing could use some help, especially if you want to give double the number of people here next year. I came to it because I bought a Zodiac FX, and I found a blog post that told me how to get a SD controller around and have to be Faucet. And then I got the conference through a blog that Josh made, but it's not like, if I'm searching for an SDN controller, I'm going to see a preview or ONS or Open Daylight. I'm not going to find Faucet without happening.
Okay, no thanks.
I refer you to my early problem with our New Zealand character.
Right. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
I have one question. I just want to know about the regarding that you mentioned about membership. What will be the benefit if one this organization get along with you guys as a member? So what's the difference between the non-member or the member? Anything?
That's a great question, and I've thought about that question a lot, and we don't have a hard answer yet is the answer, but clearly we need to be able to articulate that answer in order to encourage people to be able to join up. No, great question. I'm sorry, my answer is going to be slightly lacking. Yep.
I have an answer for that.
Yeah.
Will be helping to build the future.
That one is, yeah.
What? Do you have any third party basically members that you need? They have to do some basically contribution with you guys, do some coding or some kind of hands-on or some kind of things. What do you guys think about that? What's your thought?
So speaking personally, I wouldn't want to see it as a requirement, because there's all sorts of ways that people can contribute to Faucet. So I don't think that would be a requirement of being a member, but clearly we want to encourage people to make all sorts of contributions, whether it be through development or promotion or documentation or providing feedback. The foundation should exist to coordinate those activities, and so the more of those activities going on, the more reason there is for the foundation to exist. Yeah. We're taking up too much of afternoon tea, so I think I better stop there. So thank you very much, especially for those contributions. That's really great.